Good day, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar titled, How Can the Concept of Secure Content Management Help You Align Information Governance and Security? Today's session is brought to you by HP and Vivid, where we will focus on how you can leverage the concept of secure content management to support privacy and information security transparently within your information governance program. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. One word about myself first. My name is Gove, and I'm the Vivid chapter leader in Ottawa. I work for a company called Techno Management, which is specialized in enterprise performance management, taking strategy to portfolio, HR, and other resources. Currently, we are in the Middle East only, and I have spent most of my time in that area, part of the world. My story with HP goes back to 20 years ago, and I have worked with HP software solutions, hardware enterprise solutions, and I believe that my experience with HP Vivid Ottawa chapter will keep me in touch with the community that I always enjoyed to work with. Our host for today is Rich Lauren, and Rich is coming from an area which we all feel that is very important to us today, okay? And specifically about information governance, and he's a subject matter expert in information governance actually. In his role with HPE, Rich assists customers and partners in developing strategic solutions to tackling the toughest information management governance challenges. Next slide, please. Before we go on with Lawrence, I would like to point out some housekeeping functions where you can reach through the control panel to the right of your displays. Particularly, I would urge you to all to drop out your questions at the question pane that you can pop up on that control panel. So let's start with Rich, and let's enjoy what he has to say. Go on, Rich.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Rich Lowers. I'm with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and I'm going to try and share with you a little bit my story on how I really feel that information management really can be aligned with information security, and in particular, when you're able to use things like secure content management. And so I guess let me start out with a story that you probably all are very familiar with, and that is change in the IT environment. Change is something that I think we've all gotten used to, but you really have to reflect on just the velocity of this change. Information has been multiplied over and over and over across so many different types of repositories and so many types of data elements or data types. We've heard numerous different terms explaining them. I think big data is probably the one that we have heard the most often. This change has been dramatic. It has happened extremely quickly. You know, and even relative to our industry, it's happened quickly. But we really need to kind of reflect on that and realize that much of this data is not controlled. In fact, much of this data is directly only attributable to individual devices. They're not the corporate computing of the past. You know, this is really very much end-user computing or edge point computing. And I really just want to reflect on the volume of data. Analysts in particular have recently said that by 2020 that we will reach 40 zettabytes of data. You know, and there was a time where we never even measured anything in a zettabyte, but it's just incredibly big and just growing at an astronomical rate. And most recently, and thanks to a couple of very unique events that we've had, at least on the cover of the Wall Street Journal, we've seen that information security is beginning to kind of overshadow governance. We've seen a lot of events that have come up through not only the newspaper but also through numerous different types of just, I guess data loss events, those types of things, and I think that it has somewhat overshadowed information governance, and I don't think that that's the case. I don't think that it should be the case. I think that there's an opportunity here. That opportunity, I think, is really with the alignment of information security and information management. And the title of this webinar is my attempt at trying to really kind of describe that. I saw that title actually in a couple of the postings, and I realized how long it is. It's really quite a mouthful, and I wanted to try and describe to you what my thoughts were. I'm not a slide reader. Obviously, everybody can read this, but my thoughts are that the first thing we really need to do when we're talking about trying to help align information security and information governance is talk about collaboration and productivity, the business goals that are really associated with what we do for a living. I think that security and compliance, while they're certainly one of the things, they're not necessarily business goals. They really don't help organizations, build more widgets or sell more widgets. They're just something that we have to do and are more connected to the legal and regulatory challenges that the organization has. And then there's the values for information security, right? We want to make sure that the data that we have not only has some sort of business value, but that is protected, and that is protected from not only from risk of loss or risk of compromise, but that it's protected enough for our business to feel comfortable to use it as a milestone for truth, that they can make decisions on it, that it's not just something that that's storing. And then the last thing really is complexity and cost. I want to say that because primarily funding is usually an issue. When we're talking about trying to do information governance and security, the first thing that many organizations say is, who's going to pay for this? So this is my attempt at trying to really kind of connect the dots on these two things. I think that information governance and information security, we have a tremendous amount of shared values. I think that there are a lot of things that both of these organizations, and I use these two examples, the CIA triad of information security and the Association of Records Managers, what they call their principles, or what they used to call generally accepted record-keeping principles. If you take a look at these two things, there's a tremendous amount of alignment. A good example of principle of accountability. Is there somebody that is named as a part of the ownership of the information governance program and probably information security program, right? And who do they delegate responsibility to, and who in the organization is ensuring that the organization is actually adopting the policies and procedures to make sure that these two things work, right? So that's something that they both share. Integrity is a good one. Information should be constructed so that it is generated or managed and it has a reasonable, suitable guarantee of authenticity, right? This value in particular is a key lynch point between these two organizations, or these two I guess, disciplines. Protection, right? You want to make sure that the data that you have is structured as protected from not only for privacy or confidentiality when needed, but that if it's clearly identified as either privileged or secret or classified or essential to the business, right? These things are extremely important for an organization. Compliance is another good one, all right? So making sure that you're abiding by the laws and authorities associated with the information. And in some cases, that may include some of the security principles of encryption or of quarantining information so that it has extremely limited access, right? Availability, make sure that it's, again, a linchpin between these two groups, making sure that data is available, right? Not only is it available, meaning it's stored away somewhere, but that it can be retrieved in a timely and efficient way, and that there's a great deal of accuracy associated with getting the information. in particular for the GARP principles or the ARMOR principles, obviously retention, right? When we look at it from the securities perspective, you want to make sure that it's reasonable retention, right? That you're not keeping it forever. You know, one of the largest challenges for an information security program really is they can't protect everything everywhere. That it's impossible to do that. That by having a clear understanding of what the organization has, where they have it, and how long they need to keep it, it really does help an information security program. So that way they don't have to do so much. That's the disposition and transparency part of information governance. To make sure that organizations have information available to them, that they don't keep it forever, and that they dispose of it in a not only in a secure way, right? So to protect a client's confidentiality or protect the information isn't inappropriately reused, and then transparency, making sure that the information is open and available and verifiable, right? So that's the non-repudiation from a security standpoint, that it's something that an organization can trust and can actually count on. So how do we start to try and bring these two things together? Well, I brought up a picture of the information lifecycle because I think that that's an important thing to try and reflect upon when we're talking about secure content management. We take a look at this. You know, one of the key things about trying to leverage a secure content management tool is really getting visibility into your data. That's probably the key part of any program, because in order for you to make smart decisions about the content of the data, you have to know what it is. And in some cases, you can know what it is just by file name title, or just based on the source, or based on the document type that is being generated, or even the department. But in most cases, it really takes a great deal of intelligence to kind of break into these documents and assess what they are. And this has been something that's been used in many other industries, and I think it's really important that we start to really bring it into the security and the information governance space, because the tools are so mature now. They allow for us to create a great deal of automation for identifying what content is, for classifying content in a way that's highly accurate. In fact, in some cases, much more accurate than humans would ever look at it. My example here, I've got you can use the metadata, you can use automated classification. The idea is that once you know what something is, it allows you to apply your business rules to it, to apply your policies to it, to be able to say, hey, these are the things that I want to do. I want to make sure that if it's content that's in a secure system of record, that I just recognize that it's there and keep a good track of it and make sure that I only keep it for as long as I need to. However, if it's not in a system of record, say it's on a G drive or in an email correspondence or something like that, that I act on it differently, and I may find that I need to remove it from that repository and dispose of convenience copies, or that I need to encrypt it when it's in those repositories, because the data at present in an unencrypted location is bad, or against policy, or even against the law for some of the data types that are out there, right? And by linking what you know what something is to these business policies in an automated way, that's what I would recommend. It allows you then to try and actually control that content and be a very good steward for that content, and in some cases protect a lot better than the organization was protecting it before. And it gets to the right-hand side here. Once you have clear understanding what the content is and you've applied your business rules and the security and access considerations, it makes it very reasonable to go ahead and make sure the organization can use it, right? That it's published or distributed in an appropriate way, that there are in some cases are good reuse business processes associated with. Big data marketing is a really good example of that. You know, rules of the road are used to scrub the data, and then it's very easily used by those types of organizations within the business. And this is where we get into the compliance part of it. You know, in some cases, not only are we retaining it and preserving it for posterity or for archive purposes, but if we have regulatory or compliance requests for information, this is where we have our single point of truth. This is really a lot all in one particular slide, but I think the important part of this is really kind of the part where we talk about the automated. the volume and velocity of data today has really made it so that it is almost impossible for organizations to do these things manually, whether it's the manual classification of email, or whether it's cleaning up a G drive, or whether it's trying to figure out what to do with the decommissioning of an older HR system. The days of being able to do these things with humans, or to do these things with a person being the primary responsible party, I think are long gone. I really do. And in fact, I think that these automation techniques, now that they're available to us, they should be significantly leveraged to not only assist us in kind of keeping up with this, but also to get out from underneath the large amounts of data that many organizations have been keeping for long periods of time. So how do we get better at this? Well, so one of the things that we've seen recently, and it's something that I think is a really key part of this, is the automation of policy too. It's the ability for organizations to subscribe to the business rules and to the jurisdictional requirements that they have for data, and being able to feel comfortable that they know what the laws of the land are, not only from a day one, but also for going forward from a organizational standpoint. This automation of understanding what your business rules are, or what your regulatory or legal rules are, starts to remove some of the burden that makes many organizations hesitate in providing automation for content management or for content disposal. A good example, or the way that I've seen this described, is this kind of like this first mile, last mile description, where the first mile is really understanding exactly what your business requirements are for keeping information, what the technical requirements are for them, any industry-specific rules of the road or regulatory requirements. And in this day of age of so many mergers and acquisition events, that fluidity of their policy and your regulatory requirements is taken into account, and that organizations have the capability to quickly understand when suddenly they have new jurisdictions because of an acquisition, or that they can remove jurisdictional requirements because of a divestiture. And I think that by being able to connect this by providing, the regulatory and business values associated with retaining information, centralized application of those policies, and being able to scale them across very large amounts of data. In that previous slide, I should have really shown, the relative size when we're talking about how we apply this. This type of process can be used very, very efficiently at very high volumes. When we're talking about terabytes of data that is either acquired as a part of purchasing an organization, or that needs to be gone through to find intellectual property or other valuable assets within the organization, this is something that can be done very easily with this type of process. And then the last mile of execution, identifying where you're going to keep these things. What are your systems of record that you're going to manage this content in place? What are your systems of record that you're going to manage out of, and put it into more of a structured repository? And this also applies to container management, right? To physical records, not just the automation of electronic records. While that capability exists, there are many companies that still have a great deal of legacy in the physical content world. And this process and these types of services are available for all of these types of data elements. And I think that this is a really good model for trying to get ahead of it, right? For really trying to get a clear understanding about what can be done when it comes to the first mile and the last mile. I actually think we have a question that I'm going to go ahead and read to you. What is information security, or why has information security eclipsed information governance in most organizations when it comes to active projects and budgets? That's probably going back to this slide. Let's see if I can get back there. I think this is why. I think that the top of mind for most organizations when it comes to funding or when it comes to prioritization has a tendency to be driven by events, whether these events are things that happen routinely, or whether these events are things that are happening as exceptions they drive a lot of prioritization and activity at businesses. Here we're talking about Ashley Madison, some of the LinkedIn losses, some of the legacy data losses. The one that's not on here is obviously Yahoo. That's probably the most recent one that really has been trying to really drive security to the forefront. And I think that these events have drawn a great deal of concern to organizations because they know of the legacy issues that they have, right? Because they know that the repositories that they use on a regular basis not only have a great deal of information on it, but it probably is not in the most controlled way managed. And I think that is really what's kind of driving a lot of this, and like I said before, I think deal of opportunity not only to take advantage of this but also to align to that, right? I think that there's a great deal of focus on the confidentiality, integrity, and making sure that information is only available to the right people or right parts of the organization. If we take a look at the alignment to information governance, I think that there's a great deal of overlap. And I see a lot of organizations that are taking their information governance programs and actually bringing them into their information security programs. One good example is, I believe MasterCard has a role within their organization called the Chief Information Governance Officer, and it is that person's responsibility not only to make sure that these two things are done appropriately and that they are meeting their compliance requirements across the world, and that they have a great deal of I guess, confidence in the security of their data. But I think that role is also charged with a lot of the stuff that we're talking about when we're talking about secure content management, that they are balancing the business requirements for not only leveraging data and keeping the availability of that data very high, but also with leveraging some of the data out so that productivity can still be very high and that there is less risk associated with the retention of data. We're talking about secure content management and kind of our particular niche use of it. But for most organizations, that doesn't mean a tool. That really just means a behavior, right? It means a set of values and actions that an organization really feels that they have to do, not only to keep the value within their data, but to keep their organization safe. One of the other questions that we just got is, does cloud services change this equation? Well, that's a good point. So when we talk about being able to do this kind of whole manage and govern, many of these services are available via the cloud. I know that in particular there are many vendors that offer the subscription to policies as a software as a service. And in fact, you can then go ahead and put your selected jurisdictional requirements, your selected records types and information types that your organization has into these subscription tools and get as an output to them all of those rules of the road that you need to go ahead and act on information, what things you need to do, what things you can keep, and what things you can't keep. I think that the cloud availability also of automated governance tools, being able to store information either within the cloud or to leverage the cloud when it comes to what you're creating or capturing, right? Office 365 is a really good example. There's a great deal of data now being created in these cloud services, and tools being able to go into them to classify that information and be able to pull out of that things that are important to a company, so that way, key company information isn't left in Rich's mailbox. It's something that's scanned, it's classified, and relocated to an appropriate system of record. Those cloud services matured quite a bit, and they are available. And even on the back end of retaining and preserving, it is more typical for organizations to be keeping those types of services in the cloud and not just trying to leverage on-premises, not only physical but also applications. And one of the other questions just asked is, what is the industry doing to leverage the convergence of these two things? I think this is one place where I think the industry is a little bit behind on kind of leveraging these things. We're talking about it a little bit today, but I've really only seen a couple of industry providers start to look at these two services or these two disciplines, information security, information governance, as something that can apply together. And I think that has a lot to do with how quickly organizations have really taken a part of this. Software companies do what their customers ask them, and there's been very little incidents of customers saying, hey, can you combine these two things? Can you give us, penetration testing along with the ability to remediate and relocate or data? So we don't really have a lot of organizations or companies asking us for this. So I think the industry is a little bit behind, and going forward, I've got to say, I've heard a lot of progress being made not only in the content management tools like what HP is doing, but in the connection of content management and policies tools, which is something that we just recently announced, but also in the ability to touch other stores of data. I use this example, the last mile of physical content, structured repository, structured, the legacy of structured repositories. That's really kind of talking about the ERP systems that were installed in the early 90s, that were very, very heavily leveraged during those times. They're aged, right? There's a lot of IT departments that are struggling with their size and their volumes of data that are in these things. I think it also has become a point of issue for security, right? So it's really hard to manage very, very large databases from a security and access perspective. So being able to take content out of these structured repositories, be able to, as we kind of described here, apply the business rules, the classification rules, apply the regulatory or legal rules associated with that in very high volumes, has given organizations the ability to relocate that data not only into either more secure pieces of data, but in some cases manage it with the organization, because there's either no more value to it or there are no legal or regulatory requirements for keeping information. So why do they keep it, right? Why is it being stored? Why is it taking up valuable IT services from a disk perspective, or even from a just management of the data perspective? That's, I think, a really key part of it. Let me make sure I covered everything here. So I guess just a quick summary. I think that the alignment of these two disciplines and these two passions American organizations, I think is really going to be key, because the marriage of these two groups, both the information governance professional and the information security professional, really can put organizations in a position of not only being able to manage less information, but to manage it appropriately, right? To manage it with an eye towards protecting not only the company's reputation, but also being able to protect them from a cost perspective, whether it's a legal e-discovery cost or whether it's costs associated with the care and feeding of large pieces of data, or it's a cost associated with legacy systems being maintained. Most organizations really, are challenged with that, and I think that there's a great deal of opportunity there when these two groups come together. And I think I'd like at this point to try and open up again for questions when it comes to the participants here. If anybody has anything they'd like to add, or for me to go over in further detail, please let me know.
Rich,
Yes.
Are we expecting to start the question session, please?
I think we can, absolutely. I think I've gone over the three that have been posted already. So if we have any additional ones, that would be great.
Yeah, we have ones, but I still want to urge all participants to throw out their questions as soon as possible, so we can make use of the time left. One of the first question is, why has information security eclipsed information governance in most organizations' active project and budgets?
Yeah, we've kind of talked about that a little bit. I think that the key part of what's happened is that that there's a sense of urgency when you see things in the cover of the Wall Street Journal or when you see things show up, in media, and I think that that really has been most recently been more security losses or data loss events or other types of very dramatic events that have really done a very good job of promoting information security, but a very poor job of really trying to also talk about the governance aspects of that. Why is this data still there? Those types of kind of questions. I think that has been the biggest key. And I think that, I guess the squeaky wheel gets the funding, right? I think that's kind of been the thing, and I think that these events have really caused more of a squeaky wheel kind of thing.
Yeah. So do we understand that at time of attack, information security or securing the organization takes precedence on governance?
That's a very good point. I think that urgency or urgent events have a tendency to always get more of the security aspects associated, right? Because everybody then tries to understand, why did this happen? Can we protect it from happening again? And are there things that the organization can do to harden the data, right? To make sure it's not accessible by inappropriate parties. I think more of the long-term planning aspects to that are that there is a better way to either move data, right, to repositories that are more easily secured, or take a look at the data and profile it and say, this is data that while at its face may need to be accessed by lots of people, but maybe there are certain security things we can do with elements of the data, credit card numbers, passwords, security questions, taking an encrypt as needed approach when it comes to those types of data elements, and making sure that while they are accessible, that some of the more sensitive parts of that are really something that are more heartily protected whenever possible.
Yeah, okay. I think we'll wait a little bit to try to receive some questions from the audience. But I believe that we have touched a little bit on this when we talked about the cloud impact of this issue. What about IoT or Internet of Things? Will it have a similar impact?
Again, this is the part where we're talking about, change, right? So we know that change is something that's going to always happen. Right now we're talking about phones, right? Well, there was a time where we weren't talking about some of the more sub-devices of that. Fitness tracking devices, phone watches, or watches connect to your phone services. We're going to find more and more, I think, that the diversity of those things that collect data or that know about us or that have a profile of information that might be considered, in some areas considered very private or something that should be, kept with a high degree of security. I think that's going to happen more and more. I think that we're going to see that happen more and more. And I think that organizations really need to not try to, approach each one of these things as it happens, but more in a global or more at an organizational level, try and say, there's going to be data at these edge devices. What can we do to manage it out of those very difficult places to exert control? And be very reasonable about making the information not only available more centrally, but managing it more centrally, managing it to a higher degree of security, or managing it out, making sure that for the amount of time that it is needed by the business at these very edge kind of areas, that it is available, but when it no longer has any value, when it has exceeded its life from a value to the business perspective, that it's then managed out and that it's appropriately disposed of or appropriately archived, or something's done with it so that it's less on the secret areas, or less on those edge areas.
Yeah, perfect.
I've not seen any further questions. I don't know if anybody wants to post something or they want me to explain something in particular in greater detail. Please, let's go ahead.
Yeah, I'm open to receive any more questions. I don't want to take the role of the audience in asking questions, but I have one last one.
Certainly.
How the industry is making use of this convergence between information and governance issues, information security and information governance domains.
In my opinion, I think that the information governance community has only recently seen some of the advantages when it comes to some of these technology capabilities. We talked a little bit about this. E-discovery has been using very sophisticated analytical capabilities into data for a couple of years already. And if you can get a lawyer to accept a machine classifying a bunch of contracts, you should be able to get a general counsel to feel comfortable with classifying information so that it can be stored or encrypted or secured from an organizational perspective. And I think that the information governance community has been a little bit behind the times when it comes to trying to apply some of these technologies. But I think that is a function not only of maybe our leadership from an information governance perspective, but also probably a function of budget. Many organizations don't want to kind of spend money to clean up the G drive, right? Until they either have an event that causes them to do so, or they have a regulatory issue that causes them to do so. I think that it's been more the information security community that has looked at some of these capabilities and has more recently started to take advantage of them, not only from a pattern perspective, being able to see a pattern of activity and being able to identify when bad things are happening or when good things are happening. I also think the information security community has done a very good job in incorporating their tools into business processes, into daily use. I tell people sometimes that it's very interesting how hard it is to try and get organizations to use intelligent tools, right? Tools that have a great deal of automation and learn from humans. When the spam box has been something we've been using in email for a great deal of time. If you classify a piece of email as being spam, it's put in the spam box for you, and then it's appropriately filtered. Guess what? We've been using that type of learning for a very long period of time, and we feel comfortable with it today. So, why not use that across larger repositories? And I think that the connection between these two groups, information governance and information security, I think there's a tremendous capability not only to bring a lot of benefit to organizations, but I think also a great deal of opportunity to really move these two disciplines forward within the organization into a much higher realm, and of being able to not only increase productivity, but also to really help organizations develop their business priorities. And again, the example that I would like to use is MasterCard, and actually having a Chief Information Governance Officer and having a role that not only is there to protect the company, but also has done a very good job in taking data and cleansing it and turning it into an asset and into a profit center. And I think that's where the opportunity is.
Yeah, okay, great. I don't see any other questions here.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and I guess close it off. Thank you very much for your time today and for participating in our webinar. I think that this slide is for you, right?
Yeah, I think I need the next slide to remind the audience with the HP Discover in London.
You want me to come see you, right?
Yeah, so to our audience, yeah, I would like to remind you with the HP Discover in London, which will take place in November, from November 29th to December 1st, where it is a great networking event actually, and you will really benefit from this event. If you want to really see the actual benefits that you will come up with, we have arranged this slide so you can look at 10 different reasons where you can drive yourself or convince your management, okay, to send you there or to go there. I believe I have one more reason, an 11th reason is it is a great place for shopping before the seasons.
That's a very good reason. I like that one.
Yeah, so it will be not only a networking area, but a spending event. So take care. Finally, I would like to remind everybody, next slide please. Yeah, okay. So thank you all for attending this webinar. I hope that you will be able to complete the short survey after the webinar ends, and you can also opt in to receive any more information from Hewlett Packard about this topic. I would like to remind you too that the webinar recording and slide deck will be available to you, and it will be posted to your emails on the Vivid website. Once again, thanks for attending this webinar, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.